Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. And for you club members, not just the gold members, but for the any club member, I'll be doing a private Zoom. Let's go 7:30 Eastern time on Wednesday. Do a private Zoom for you guys. So just pay attention to the link. Join me there. Bring a lot of questions. We had a handful of people last time, so let's get some more in there. You club members, it's a good chance to just get some Q&As. Whatever questions you want to ask, whatever you want to know that's going on, join us on that Wednesday, 7:30 Eastern time, and let's go from there. Have some fun. So today I'm going to do my 5 things again, but first, do have a little new promotion running this week for Bird Dogs, and one of the things is you'll hear in the ad talk about getting a free hat. So here's the hat. So go sign up, get some merchandise, and get a free hat. It's a pretty cool hat, nice material. So keep you nice and warm. You're on the golf course wearing it. Be a really good place to look at my hair, got some hat head. But anyways, good place to wear it, really absorbent, etc. Good quality. So anyways, stay tuned for that read in a little bit. So anyway, let's get to the 5 things I think, because that's what you're here for. So 1, I think the Commanders have done a really good job with players and their families starting last year with new owner Josh Harris. And I think we saw that throughout the free agency period, and it was really hammered home the other day when we had a chance to talk to Tress Way and some of the other guys, but I think it's been hammered home throughout this, but Tress Way really kind of put it into words about what it meant to him, what they've done for families with the signings. And it's a little thing, but it's really kind of matters to the players. And so you may have seen some pictures of Tress Way on the Commander's feed with his 3 kids there at a table, like they're signing a contract or getting ready for a press conference, whatever it is. His son actually popped on the Zoom press conference with us for a few seconds. But what they've done is really incorporated the families into these events. And these are not press conferences. They're not bringing them here to trot them out for a press conference because they've signed some huge deal. Tress Way obviously been here a long time, signs a 1-year deal. It's not this huge, it's a good signing, but we're not talking it's not like they just drafted Jaden Daniels, right? For all these guys coming in, they're inviting their families. They're making it special. So listen, I'll tell you what, maybe you saw what Tress Way had to say, but I want you to hear what Tress Way had to say about what it meant to him to have his family coming here for this event.
And I walk in and all of our coaches, all the front office, music playing, screaming, yelling, high-fiving, hugs around. I'm just pinching myself, dude. This is so surreal. 12 years here, and I made it a point to just tell AP. I was like, man, I've been here for 12 years. I was like, I didn't even know teams did things like this, and I've never been through it, and I just wanted to take the time to thank them. And so it is such a fun and exciting time to be a part of this franchise, and I've been thankful to be here every year that I've been here. But there's just a lot of special things going on. There's a lot of special people, so I'm honored to be a part of it.
This is something they never did before. So it's really like, there are some things that don't require a lot of thought or effort, and just that makes such a big difference. And just having them bring their families here, it allows the organization to show that how they feel about their families, and it gives the players a feeling that they care about more than just them as a player. And I think it all matters. And when they got those NFLPA surveys, they ranked very poorly in the family aspect for the first couple of years, not this year, because of the improvements. It's stuff that they're doing at the stadium, daycare at the stadium, things like that really make a difference. But it's also scenes like this where, again, it's not like they're trotting them out to a press conference. They're just bringing these guys in for a signing. But when they're coming there, people, you see the pictures with Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, hugging Debo, other coaches in there, other people in the building there. And it's just it's not new this year. Again, it's something they started last year, but I think stuff like that goes a long way. I think you want to make people feel special for when they're joining your organization. I think this is what this does. But I also think that Dan Quinn, for example, is very cognizant, and I think Peters is as well. And I'll explain why. Well, not explain why, but you'll hear in a minute. Some connections I think he has to this type of atmosphere. But Dan Quinn, I think, really places emphasis on going beyond the coach, the player, whatever. Like who Michael Gallup, whom they signed on Thursday, was talking about how in Dallas, how Quinn would talk to him. Like, this is a defensive coordinator, and Gallup, obviously a receiver, but yet Gallup felt like he took an interest in him beyond just as a player, and things like that matter to them. And even Quinn, I've told you before, has those Tuesday sessions set up for his coaches where they have a mental skills coach just kind of talk to them for a few minutes, go through some breathing exercises, and but it's all designed to kind of balance oneself, but also to kind of remind them what's most important. And so, as Quinn said, and I don't think he's just giving words to it. I think it's genuine where he's talking about like why it's important to him that they have that approach because he wants it. He wants it to be good for these coaches with their families because the better they are with it, the more, certainly it helps them. It also helps the organization. But I do think it's designed just to help with that. And, it doesn't mean, when you do things like this, it doesn't mean you're going to get every guy, but I think word definitely spreads like, hey, if you want to go there, it's a good place to go. It's not the same thing. And I think, they clearly missed on some players. But it's sometimes it comes down to money. Like DeMarcus Lawrence, he gets a multi-year deal and to go to Seattle. Well, Washington was going to offer him a 1-year deal, my understanding. Well, if you're DeMarcus Lawrence, where are you going to go? They're going to give you security out there. I would have preferred the 1-year deal. Excuse me. I think when I look at him, and I like DeMarcus Lawrence, but I think a 1-year deal is what was a good move for here. I don't think they want to get tied to bad contracts. But the point is, I don't think it was about anything other than, hey, you got a better offer. And sometimes that happens. But I think when things are equal, I think you'll see a lot of guys who will want to be here for things like this. And you go back to, this is where I brought up Adam Peters earlier. I remember talking to Charles Mann after all the changes last year, after Josh Harris came on board, and just the changes for the alumni and how different it was for the alumni of other teams that he had played with, namely the 49ers, and how he had told me he went to a reunion of 49ers players from a Super Bowl team. And his wife was like, you barely played. I mean, he wasn't a big part of it. He was clearly a bigger part of what happened here. But he said when he went there, you would have thought that you would have thought that I was the star player, the way they treated me. And it makes people feel proud. It makes them feel good. And it makes them feel valued. And I think, that's one thing he said that happened after Josh Harris took over here, that there was more that, some of the alumni felt like they were more valued for their contributions in the past. But stuff like that, word about that stuff spreads and it makes you a better organization. Doesn't mean you're always going to win, doesn't mean you're always going to do great, but it does mean you can be viewed as a different kind of organization. And I think the details of an organization matter. Mike Shanahan would talk about that when he came here. Others would as well. And they'd want to create a first-class operation. The problem was with the previous owner, you couldn't do that because other things would get in the way. And I think you heard Mike McDaniel at the owners' meetings last year. I think it was him brought up something about not having to pay for his own coffee in Miami. Well, that was a direct result of something that happened here. So, my understanding is when these guys came in here, that after after a year or so, that whether it's Bruce Allen or Dan Snyder, they removed a coffee machine from the coach's office, like a really nice, really nice coffee machine that these guys use a lot, and it costs thousands or whatever. But they removed it because they didn't want to pay for it, and they wouldn't have to pay to restock it. So Mike Shanahan went out and paid with his own money to put it back, get something back in there, just a little touch for the coaches, like, so it's little things like that that others notice that sticks with them, and word travels about that as well. So that stuff is over, and I think they're in a better spot with it, of course, for sure. So anyways, that's number one. Number two, I think they're going to have a lot of hungry guys on this roster this year, or so they hope. And if they do, that can really pay dividends. We've seen that before. You look at the Deebo Samuel deal, like he's getting, it's on a 1-year deal, right? And it's funny because kind of going back to the first point why he said he was coming here, and this is kind of funny to hear, and you're still getting used to it. So we asked him why Washington, and he said basically, I like winners. Coming from San Francisco, you win, and so I like winners. That's what he said. Is it weird for you to hear that? Because it can still be kind of weird for me to hear that, just because it just makes you shake your head at the transformation in 1 year of how this place is viewed. And from the outside, now you've got to continue it. Like, you can't be a 1-year wonder and then continue to feel like everybody looks at you a certain way. You've got to build on this, and you have to have a successful season by whatever definition. I don't think it has to be a Super Bowl or bust season. I don't think they have that kind of heavy loaded roster to do that. Can they get there? Why not? But do you look at the roster and say, oh my gosh, this is the top team to get there? Well, no, you can't, not with the Eagles in the division. But the point is, like, you can have a successful year, have a good regular season, do well in the playoffs, whatever it is. There are other, it's not a Super Bowl or bust type year, but you need to follow up with another good year so that winner's label continues to stick to you, something it hasn't done here in a long time. But anyways, the whole point of this is the motivational aspect as well. And I think for Deebo Samuel, I think there's a lot of motivation for him. He still has a chance to, if he goes out and has a good year, to go out and get another big deal, whether from here or somewhere else. And I think that matters. And so, the other thing that I think he appreciated was how it wasn't Washington declined a bonus option, excuse me, for him that would have given him like $15.4 million. Well, that was kind of expected. But what they did too is, by doing that, they guaranteed all his money for this year, which matters to players. Like, you don't want to go, even though they weren't going to cut him. So as soon as he's on the roster for to start the season or get the first game, he's going to get paid that whole salary. Well, now you're going to get it, right? So it's just a little thing. And they threw in $3 million in incentives. It's a little thing, but it's still only a 1-year deal. And what they did is they're going to take the cap hit all this year. And they could, if they'd taken the player option, that option bonus, they could have spread out over 2. The result is, the money is the same in terms of whether it's 1 or 2, but they're going to keep it all in 1. Anyway, but by doing all that on the 1-year deal, this is what Samuel said that Washington is getting and what he wants to show.
1, they can motivate Deebo. 2, you're going to get a dog out here. I'm ready to come in here and work right alongside of Terry. We got drafted together. Like I just said, he been playing at a high level for the past 6 years. We're going on 7, so they kind of consider us old, but I don't consider us old. I think these young legs still moving. His body's still working pretty well. I'm just ready to get to work.
I wasn't sure what to expect when I received my first order of Bird Dog shorts. I already had khaki shorts of similar colors, then I tried them on and realized I didn't have any shorts like Bird Dog's. I'll admit to being skeptical because the shorts have liners, and I've worn some shorts in the past with liners that were uncomfortable and the liners were too noticeable. But that wasn't the case with Bird Dog shorts. They're versatile. I wore them on a hike, I wore them to a ball game, I wore them when my wife and I went out to dinner. I also like their side pockets so you can put your wallet or phone on the side of your shorts, not in the back. If you're going golfing, there's room for tees or an extra golf ball on the side. For a limited time, our listeners get a free hat with any order when you use the code word KEIM, K-E-I-M, at birddogs.com. Get this hat completely free when you use the code word KEIM, K-E-I-M, at birddogs.com. That's birddogs.com. Support our show and let them know that we sent you. I think when you get a lot of guys that have those one-year deals, you do get a lot of guys who want to go out and show what they can still do. Dante Fowler wanted to do that. He ended up with 10.5 sacks, had a good year for him. Now, he didn't parlay that into what he had hoped to be would be a big payday. I mean, listen, $9 million or whatever he got is still a very good payday, but comparatively to defensive ends, guys who pass rushers, I think he was expecting more in a multi-year deal. Bottom line, though, is it worked here. It worked for that one-year deal here. So it doesn't work for everybody, but it did work for him. And it worked for some others. I think you look at Michael Gallup. What does he have left? What can he do? And I think one thing I will say about that signing, I did like the signing mainly because there's a no harm, no foul. I think he adds another veteran depth piece at that position, and it just gives you, just like the defensive line, they've raised the floor of the talent at that position. So Gallup was a very good contested catcher, pass catcher in the past, and you have a guy who can get him the ball like that in Jaden Daniels. I'd still like to add a little bit more speed on the outside, but I think he gives you a guy, if he's right, if he's healthy and all that can go out and be a contested catcher. But he also has to prove what he can still do, because it's only a one-year deal. He was released by Dallas a year ago, and then he decided to sit out in 2024. So he's got something to prove, because and he actually signed with the Raiders. I think you have other guys like that, Jonathan Jones, Dietrich Wise. Prove what you can do, and then you can get rewarded, whether it's again here or somewhere else. I think there is, Marshawn Lattimore, I think, is in that category as well. He's not in the final year of his deal, but he's coming off a tough playoff showing against top receivers. And I think it's one of those things, there's a lot of talk about what he can do, what he can still do, what he might not be able to do, et cetera. Well, it's funny because Noah Igbenogany was talking to us on the Zoom about that very thing. And he's like, listen, I don't think, and he even said, like, I don't think people understand how hard it was for him to come in and try to play after missing all that time. Then you're playing high level receivers, and that he's like, basically he's like, give him the offseason, give him training camp to show what he can really do. So, which I think is only fair, because, who knows? You don't know the impact of that injury when he came back. What was it still like? And also then not having a lot of time to really practice and work back in, perhaps the way you want to. So we'll see. But the point is, I think he's also going to have some of that attached to him. Javon Kinlaw, I think, will have some of that. He got a 3-year deal, so it's not a 1-year deal thing, but people talked a lot about that contract, as you know. And I'm sure he's heard some of that. So, I'm sure he's going to want to go out and show what he can do. And again, I think, I'm really curious to see how they use him, because I think there's a way that you can untap a lot of what he offers. And he definitely has some very good traits. So I think, that can be a good thing. Now, there's a downside with some of these one-year deals. Now, not all these guys I just talked about are one-year deals, but with the one-year deals, if you're a receiver, for example, and you need to get catches to get that deal, how are you going to react to situation where maybe you're not getting as many? Now, Gallup has always been a role player. He doesn't need to get 60 catches, right? That's not been who he is. If he gets 30 to 40, that's pretty good showing, because you also have Noah Brown there. You also have Deebo Samuel, and of course, Terry McLaurin. But this is also why I'd want to get Terry McLaurin extended before the season, so that way you don't go into the season with a lot of receivers needing to get some numbers to get that next payday. Take care of that guy. Let the others go show what they can do and prove it. But we know that McLaurin, what he can do. So anyways, so that's number 2. All right. Number 3, I think it helps to have a guy like Jonathan Jones here for Marshawn Lattimore. Now, this is just my own theory, and I haven't talked to a lot of people about this, but it did come up in one of the gold, in a session with my gold members on our Zoom conference call, is just about that. And I thought it was an interesting topic. And I do agree. I think Jones adds leadership in that room. Marshawn Lattimore is as we know, the dog mentality, right? And I think Jones has that as well. But Jones has also been a leader for a team that was highly successful when he was first there. So for the first few years he was there. So I think he adds that. And I think for Marshawn Lattimore, like, there wasn't that other guy in that room, who had a resume and a lot of starting games in his background. Mikey Sainristil, we know he can be a very good leader down the road, but when you're coming in here, you're a rookie. What's he going to be able to help Lattimore with? Now, certainly some things, but it's different coming if there's a veteran who can give you some wisdom or talk to you on the bench about certain things or in the room, et cetera, and just or on the sidelines. Like we saw Lattimore talking with like Benjamin St. Juste, for example, before practices, kind of going over some technique stuff and all that. But I also think a lot of it too will come down for a guy like Jones and Lattimore, if you're on the field together, can he help once you establish yourself in a relationship with that guy and you have a relationship with that guy, then you can maybe learn how to talk to him and make sure that you keep Lattimore's head in the game because I felt like he took his head out of the game, which is why they took him out of the game a couple of times. So, but I think having a guy like Jones here can help with that. And I don't know that he's not quite Bobby Wagner because he doesn't have that kind of resume. He's not some surefire for a Hall of Famer, but he is a highly respected veteran who has done some things, has been a solid player, can help them in a lot of ways. But I think this is one way where I think it's good to add that guy in that room for that purpose. And somebody who's been through a lot gives them somebody else to talk to. And as Mikey Sainristil develops in the NFL, he will develop more and more as a leader. But right now, I think it's good to have that other veteran voice in there for sure. Number 4, I think the versatility of the defensive line is paramount. Now, I've talked about this before because we've just gone over the signings, but indulge me for just another minute here. Because I think you have guys like Goldman, Kinlaw, Wise, Jacob Martin, who can do different things. And I think they've shown they can play in different fronts. And I think that's very important. I think it gives you the ability to perhaps change fronts, right? But key, using the same personnel and still be effective in those fronts. It's one thing to change fronts, but if you don't have the guys who can do well in multiple fronts, then you're changing fronts, you're given a different look, but is it effective? So now I think if the floor has been raised the way I think it has been, then you can run multiple fronts to be more effective. The depth is just better. And I was talking to a defensive coach about this the other day and just what the advantage is if it works. And one of the big pluses, again, a team would have to prepare for different fronts that can be effective. So you're now going to spend time on that in practice, right? If nothing else. I think, like, for example, you could go from a 5-man front to a 4-man front using the same personnel, but you're giving them now a different look. It also helps you adapt to different run games in a better way if it all goes well. So this is all in theory right now because we're still in March and you can't say it's going to happen that way because we don't know. And I think that's the hard thing to know, right? But I do think it's one of listen, we also know they don't have a dynamic defensive lineman at this point, but they do have more quality depth, more quality across the board. So what can you do with that? And that's something I want to get into a little bit later with some other people on different shows, just what can that defensive front do with the personnel they have? But I do think like if you want to defend a zone run team or a gap counter scheme like this, if you can be more effective in multiple fronts, it gives you an ability to then adapt during a game or week to week to different looks that you're going to get, different run games that you're going to get. So that is a key. Now, again, how it plays out, we'll see. But right now, when you look at it on paper, I think that's one thing that you kind of have to look at and consider that it could be something there. Again, we're not talking Aaron Donalds here and all that. But do they have more quality and enough of that quality to be more effective against multiple looks? So anyways, there you go. That's number 4. Number 5, I think a lot of people are weighing in on their building process and how they're building the roster, and we'll see how it goes. Like, listen, the way they did it last year worked. It worked in part because they brought in the right guys. They also drafted the right quarterback, who again will be here this year as well. So you always have to remember that. Like when you look at this roster, like, oh yeah, well they got Jane Daniels last year. That was part of it. Yes, it was, and he's still here, and he'll probably be better. So, but last year was so much about fit, and I think some people, if you're going to only focus I think some people want to focus only on drafting players. Like the only way you can build this you build it through the draft, but you also build through various means. That means trading players. That does mean signing some players and signing not just big name players, but for but for fit quality players across the board. The more those you have, the more you can withstand in over a 17-game season, the injuries. Now, there are spots where you'd say like you'd like to have more youth here, here, and here, right? And I think you can still get some in the draft. I think the hard part is, and the other part of it is they're not tied to bad deals. They're just not. Again, if Javon Kinlaw for some reason doesn't make it after in his second year, he costs $18 million. Okay, it's 1 year where it's bad. This year it's $7 million. It's not that bad at all. And so, I don't want to keep bringing him up, but he's the one that signed the multi-year deal, right? So that's why I say that. So, but it's not you're not tied to a bad contract. So I think that's been a good way to build this roster. And, I don't think they went out and made some bad deals. So, and the other part of it is, again, you like to get more youth, but one of the things I don't know about I think it's like, I'm curious to see how it plays out, is you had, again, we know there were like 12 guys on the roster last year, including practice squad, who were rookies last year, including 9 draft picks. That's a lot. That's good. That's a good foundation. That's what they want. So if you would you really want to add 20 rookies over a 2-year span? Like, that's a lot yes, you can, could you build something with that? Of course you could. There's nothing wrong with that approach. But I think if you're in a situation where you do want to try to kind of balance some of that, so you balance developing the young guys from last year and not hoping, but you need to make sure that guys like McGee, McCaffrey, Sinnott, that they keep developing. Dominique Hampton, Tyler Owens. I think you got some more guys who can help and contribute in ways for sure. And then you need to hit a couple guys this year, but have they spread it out? Like, so in other words, you're going to have these rookies, and when, a few years when Jayden Daniels up for a big deal, that I think, would you want all these guys kind of up at the same time? Well, no, I don't think you would. But now you have a case, you'll definitely have some up around that time. But if you have these couple years where you have, fewer draft picks, but then as in the next year or the year after, you get more draft picks. Now you can add some youth as some of these other guys are kind of moving on, but also then it puts you in that contract situation where you shouldn't be as prohibited because of Daniel's deal. I think there's a way to make that work. And I don't like this. That's one thing I want to kind of find out more about, is some of that process. If I'm right in some of that thinking, is that part of it? Or is it just a matter of like, hey, these are the guys you want to get, and maybe I'm overthinking some of it. I don't think I am, but but that's something I want to explore with some other people as we move on in the off season, because I think, it could be a key to their building and maintaining with Jayden Daniels. So anyways, that's just something to probe more later on. But you know what? We'll see how it works. And there's going to be a lot of months to talk about what they've done and et cetera. So anyway, folks, that's it for me. I'll be back. I appreciate you tuning in again. Get that bird dog hat. Anyways, I'll be back on Tuesday. Talk to you next time.